Welcome to the Healthy Perspective Podcast with your host, chiropractor, entrepreneur, mentor, and author, Dr. Chris Bowman. He'll break down and extract the secret sauce behind his own success and the success of some of the top leaders in every category and from around the world. Get ready for your weekly mental adjustment because shift is going to happen.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Healthy Perspective Podcast. I am super excited for today. We have another doctor on the podcast. Dr. Tom Preston considers himself very fortunate to be a success in his ideal, both personally and professionally, as a highly sought after trainer, advisor, consultant, and coach to healthcare professionals and entrepreneurs worldwide. His services are in high demand. Throughout his long coaching career, Tom has been helping his clients design and manifest the business and life of their dreams. He assists them in connecting them to their most authentic version of themselves, and then leverages the power, wisdom, and creativity of that connection to help them be more so they can do more and ultimately have more. Dr. Tom, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, it's a pleasure, Chris. I'm honored to share my thoughts.
So I found you by just kind of searching, who is evaluating practices. And I think there was a Facebook post where multiple people recommended your company, started to learn more, about you, follow you and whatnot. And I'm like, I need to bring you on the podcast because I think what he has to share is very valuable to not only me, but to people out there, those that are starting up businesses, whether they're service professionals or, some other sort of business. Starting with the end in mind, in my opinion, is going to save you the most ignorance tax, where you don't have to start over or reinvent yourself throughout your career so that you can prepare for your exit. I think that's what Dr. Tom specializes in, especially with his coaching and then practice evaluation story. So Dr. Tom, why don't you kind of just bring us up to speed? What were you like early in your career? What kind of led you into coaching, practice evaluation, and that sort of thing? And then we'll kind of get into the principles of what it's like to develop a business that's actually sellable.
Yeah, for sure. So, one of the reasons I coach and consult so much, Chris, is because I did pay a lot of what you phrase ignorance tax, which I think is a good terminology. Because I got out of university and I just wanted to serve and practice, but I wasn't really clear about, who I was and who I wasn't and how I wanted to serve and who I wanted to serve. So I went through lots of perturbations of different styles of practice, right? I ran kind of a practice where I was, the team chiropractor for the local junior A hockey team. And I went kind of that sports kind of route for a while. And then I went for a period of time where I had a lot of medical referrals because I was getting great results with people. And that, was okay, but it had a price to pay until, finally I settled into what was really my niche in practice, which was a family wellness practice. 30% of my practice were kids under the age of 12. Family is my highest value. It always has been. I got 5 daughters, which is proof of my value of family. But,
right.
And so that was really where my niche was. But I wandered around for a few years, and it wasn't that I wasn't successful, because I truly believe that success is a consciousness in your head and your heart, right? But it certainly was a lot more fun, a lot more fulfilling, and a lot more prosperous to actually, find my niche, my place, my where my soul was expressed in its most authentic self to the world, So so that's what a lot of my coaching is about, is to help people get really clear about who they are, who they're not, what's authentic for them. That's really my buzzword, Chris, right? So that they can get clear about, how it is they want to show up in the world. I believe the creative intelligence, made greatness in all of us. There's that spark of genius, that spark of wisdom, that spark of, God particle, as Leon Letterman calls it. But and so there's greatness inside all of us. It's just how what's the most efficient and effective way to express it to the world, right? So how I got into coaching, Chris, it wasn't like a divination experience or a burning bush or anything special. It was literally, I just really found what it was that I wanted my life to look like, both personally and professionally. I didn't want to be the boring workaholic guy that had pictures of his kids on his nightside stands to remember what the heck they looked like. And I wanted to balance and have a great life as I live my life, not busy, workaholic, and then retire someday so I can enjoy my life. Because,
right.
I don't know how you and your listeners have been, Chris, but I've lost some friends, I've lost some family members younger in life. And, certainly the intention is to be here for a long time, but none of us really know,
Right.
So if you're waiting until tomorrow to start living, then it's possible you could be disappointed. So my ideal, Chris, was taking 10 to 12 weeks of holidays a year, working about 25 contact hours a week in the clinic and making a hell of a nice 6-figure income. And it's like, apparently some of our colleagues were interested in that. And they went, how the heck do you do that? So that's how I started coaching. People just started asking me. They asked me to present places and stuff, and then they asked me to coach. And I come up with a model, Chris, which actually influences possibly our conversation when we get into practice appraisals, evaluations. But it's a 4-pillared model. It's vision, focus, systems, and team. And that formula, Chris, applies to any business across the world. And certainly I've really specialized in chiropractic and in healthcare specifically. But that, if you're clear about what your vision is for your life and your business, not just one or the other, but both, you can remove the focus blocks or obstacles that are in the way of that vision expressing itself. You have systems that support your vision, not somebody else's vision. And you have a team that supports your vision. It's a recipe for success, and certainly I've proven that in my almost 30-year consulting career. We've got clients from all over the world that we've been able to help build their life and their ideal. And, sometimes that looks like 50 people a week, and sometimes that looks like 1,500 a week. And I'm not attached to the numbers or any of that stuff. What I'm attached to is people getting clear and then living from that place of authenticity, because, man, that's where the joy and the fulfillment and the prosperity really resides. So that's kind of my background, Chris, in terms of coaching. Did I say that? Did I get that clear enough?
Yeah, that's great. And I love how you didn't pursue coaching because you're just looking for extra income. It's just like, hey, people are interested in what I'm doing. And, one thing led to another. And it's like, well, I should probably start charging for the value that I'm giving to people. And I think that's where a lot of people get mixed up. It's like, I want to start coaching to add an extra 10K to my income, or, whatever. While that's a benefit, it's a side effect of you presenting value. Like we always talk about in chiropractic, side benefits, right? The goal is to clear your nervous system and your headaches might go away. The goal is to clear your nervous system and your kid might not be colicky anymore. It's like, I'm going to help build your life, and we're also going to be making more money together. So I love that you partner with people, and it's not just this, here's how I created my life. If you do exactly what I do, then you can have what I have, but it's like, what do you actually want? Because if you only want to see 50 people a week, you might have to charge more if you want to have the same income as somebody that sees 1,500 a week, whatever it is. So I love how it's customized, and there's all too many coaching programs that, they basically just teach what their mentors taught them, which is usually work hard, to have long hours, and, maybe take a day off on Sunday so that way you can rest. So I love that anything is possible. You just got to figure out what exactly that is. Now, with that in mind, it kind of is a skill to develop the ability to create vision, to craft vision. Well, how would you explain to somebody, maybe newer, graduating from chiropractic school, PT school, medic school, whatever it is, and what is it like to teach somebody how to develop a vision? I'm sure that's more than just a couple sentence conversation, but what would be the principles of and the art of like developing a vision for somebody, startup, newer, wanting to develop a business bigger than themselves?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. And I find a lot of clients, Chris, that come to us early on, not just even fresh out of school, but people have been around for 5, 10, 15 years in the profession that, they've kind of had the stuffing beat out of them, and they almost forget how to dream. And, it's almost like they need to go talk to a 3 to 5-year-old kid someday, because they're just all full of dreams and visions and because they don't know it's not possible, right? So people get almost numb to the fact that, maybe some of their dreams didn't turn out. But I would offer this, Chris, in my experience, almost 30 years consulting now, that a lot of those things that people thought they wanted weren't really authentic for them. They bought into somebody else's dream, which is why, and I appreciate your affirmation of our model of coaching, because, there's too many people, as you already stated, Chris, that stand on the top of a platform somewhere and go, hey, look at me, I have a great life and a great business. And if you just copy what I did, you'll be great too. And at best, Chris, I could be is a cheap imitation of them. Right. I would rather have an original version of me, original version of you any day of the week, right? BJ wrote a lot about that in the Green Books. And so I think it's important that concept gets reintroduced back, to our profession with how it could go. And not just our profession, because it applies across all industries, but, specifically, I love our profession, the profession of chiropractic, an awful lot. That's where most of my work has been done, right? So to get back to the vision piece, so I'll actually say, I thought of 2 things, but I'll say 3. 1, go and talk to a 3 to 5-year-old, pretend you're 3 and 5, and what would you love? Number two, Chris, is pay attention to the energy of the emotions you feel when you think in a certain direction, right?
Yeah.
And you can really simplify this into a binary. You can go like, some things make you feel good and some things make you feel bad.
Yeah.
The things that make you feel bad are literally, it's like an inner guidance system that the creator gave us to go that that's not your path, right? This whole thing about find out your weaknesses and spend the rest of your life to work on them, screw that. That's a license for disaster and heartache, right? But literally, if you use the emotional energy of who you are and your thoughts, and if you're thinking about X, Y, and Z, and it brings you joy, brings you passion, you may not get exactly how you're going to accomplish that vision. And I think this is where a lot of people get lost, is they, instead of focusing on why they want it and the energy of the why, they immediately go to, yeah, but how do I do that? And because they don't know the how immediately, they just get stopped or blocked. Yeah. And that, I believe, is an error in judgment, right? So that's another piece of the puzzle. The third piece, Chris, which is probably self-evident, but people go, well, I don't know what I want. I'm not clear. I can't figure stuff out. And I said, well, tell me what you don't want.
Yeah.
Right? Because figuring out what you don't want can actually help, like, bring you into, like, literally just down like a funnel, if you will, or a chute, to decide what it is you do want. And a lot of people are saying, well, I don't want this, and I don't want my life to look like this, and I don't want my back. Say, good. So now what do you want it to look like? Well, maybe I want it to look like this. And that can actually be a great asset for, people looking to get that clarity of vision. Of course, there's other great tools, Chris, like gratitude journals. And I'm a huge fan of meditation and those quiet moments and the space between the thoughts, which are also can be great guidance mechanisms. But, really pragmatically, there's at least three things we just talked about.
I love it. That's amazing. I wrote a book, which I'll send to you as a thank you for being on. And I feel like the way you describe vision is the same way that I describe it, where it's like, it's something created in your mind that you don't have the current resources, time, or know-how of how to actually make it happen. It's something that's there, but it's not something that's here. And I think you're right. That does scare a lot of people because especially in the instant gratification culture of America, if we picture something, we want to go on Amazon and get it in 2 days. If we need something, we want to be able to go to Walmart, the store, whatever it is, any type of food, especially here in Southern California, we can have within 10 to 15 minutes or 45 if you want to use DoorDash, And so I think that is so good to think about, a 3 and 5 year old, like what simplify things all the way down, because a 3 and 5 year old can't quite get the cereal way up there. They have a vision of them eating it, but they don't know how they're going to get there yet. I think one of the most inspiring things of vision. Have you been to Machu Picchu in Peru?
I have not.
So put that on your bucket list. It's absolutely fascinating, especially when you talk about vision. So these people only lived maybe like 30 to 40 years or so, just because they didn't have hygiene, they didn't have medicine, they didn't have all the resources, they had a harsh environment and whatnot. However, the society that they built on the top of this mountain took well over hundreds of years to complete. And so you think about the first person that thought, man, this is a perfect place for a kingdom. You got, everything to look at. You got the river, you got this, and this, and then to pass that vision down to the next generation. And then 3 or 4 generations later, this vision is now being completed. And it's absolutely phenomenal. You think about in the Bible too, like King David, like this is the temple that I want to build. And it wasn't until Solomon's time that it actually got to be, built completely. And so that, like, thinking of a vision, you might not even complete your vision in your lifetime. And if your vision is big enough, you shouldn't. Like we should be thinking about what legacy stuff, like what can my kids have now to build on? And sure, they might, shift and change the vision a little bit, but hopefully it becomes better. You think of what Didi was going to do with chiropractic, and then what BJ wanted to do with chiropractic, and then you think about Blair or Gonstead or, all these different Reggie Gold, all these different sort of people, all with a similar message, but their vision for chiropractic outgrew them. So now we are pursuing the same principles as they did. And I love being able to put ourselves in those shoes of like, man, what can I not accomplish even in my own lifetime, but 3 or 4 lifetimes from now? And that kind of sets you up for, man, what kind of business do I need to set up now so that way it's sustainable beyond me? Now, when you're doing practice appraisals and those sort of things, what are some of the kind of, most important things that you look for? And if it's not there, what are the most difficult things to coach, somebody through to develop those four pillars that you talked about for a business that's actually sellable?
Yeah, well, and you touched on some things. I'll answer that question directly, Chris. But just some of the things that are very important to me is the concept of legacy and succession, right?
Yeah.
And if there was one thing I think that this profession in general, could do a better job at, it's legacy and succession, right? I know I've had several real veteran docs been in practice 30, 40, 50 years, and like they don't have any succession plan. They don't know who to pass the torch to, and they just close their doors, right? And there's mountains of wisdom and opportunity there to pass that on. And I've been reading some stuff in Forbes recently about some of these Japanese corporations that have these 3, 4, and sometimes even 500-year business plans, because the culture there is so intertwined with the economics and the industry and stuff that they really see generational legacy going on. So literally I'm running a program just called literally succession planning, which is to teach docs how to build a succession plan so that they can pass the torch. Because I agree with you, Chris, right? The principles of chiropractic are so pure, and the vision for it, may be a bit unique and change with times as different technologies develop and stuff, but the principles are there. And if a business that you've built that you believe in, it's part of your mission, part of your passion, part of your purpose for being alive on the planet, why wouldn't you want that to outlive you? Why wouldn't you want to pass that on to generations and stuff? And I don't mean even just the doc. I mean, we're talking about the office staff and the admin staff and stuff, right? Like literally build a principle-based business that will allow that. So some of the factors, Chris, just to get into that, really broad strokes, any business in the world, there's two main factors that predicate its value. One is the goodwill, and the second is the assets, the tangible stuff, right? Well, in chiropractic, that ratio is like 90% goodwill, 10% assets, usually, because it doesn't take a lot of stuff to literally be able to do what we do, tables, maybe some computers, iPads, whatever. But it's not like we need a bunch of robots or something at GM to put screws or bolts in, So again, if you look at that, really, when you talk about goodwill, really, my synonym for that, Chris, is reproducible profitability, right? Because if you're thinking about selling a business, like you got to really put yourself into the buyer's shoes, and the buyer's going to come in and put in tens or hundreds of thousands or maybe millions of dollars to buy this business. Well, anybody that can access that kind of capital, they can take that same capital and redirect it into some other purchase, like Tesla stock or Apple stock, or buy a piece of real estate or something, right? So if you think about that, what the buyer's thinking about is what's the probability that I can reproduce a similar profit to Dr. Chris or Dr. Tom or whatever, right? Because then if you go into like really classic mergers, acquisitions in business, Chris, right? Most merger acquisitions in Fortune 500, they're looking at a 3 to 5 year event horizon to clear the debt, calculate or recapitulate their capital, while they're paying salaries and doing things, right? Because then they have a tangible asset to sale. And this is what a lot of docs really miss on, Chris, right? Is they miss on that we're talking about reproducible profit. Because I don't mention names, of course, but I can think of 2 docs right off the bat that are billing $400,000 a year, but they can barely make their car payments, for God's sakes. So it's not about revenue, it's not about billings, it's about profit. And when you talk about profit, Chris, it's not just profit, it's reproducible profit, right? So now what you're talking about is what's the probability, again, that some other doc could come in and reproduce that profit or even do better. Well, now you're talking about systems, you're talking about structure, you're talking about reproducibility. And, you can take any franchise in the world, Chris, like the big golden arches, McDonald's or Starbucks or something, and you can plug in a relatively uneducated, sort of lower common denominator person to plug into that structure and systems, and the darn things, work, right? So again, chiropractic isn't quite as simplistic as the 2 examples, like, hey, Starbucks, McDonald's, but the principle is there, right? Thinking about ways to reproduce that, because BJ wrote in the Green Books, he talked a lot about the rugged individualists that, were attracted to chiropractic. And I think there's a lot of truth to that even today, Chris, right?
Yeah.
Most of the people I know in the profession are highly self-actualized, they're self-realized, they're willing to, let the sun rise and shine on their shoulders as to whether they can, make their payments or do whatever they need to do. And that's fantastic. But what they tend to do is they use all of their energy and ambition and drive to drive the business. And eventually there's only so much of that to go around, right? So they run out of energy, or they hit a glass ceiling in terms of, how much they can produce, how much service they can deliver, because they're trying to do it all themselves.
Yeah.
And again, there's a way to keep the heart and soul in a business and still have structure and systems there to run it,
Right.
And that's really the piece that, as on the systems side of our 4 pillars, that's really what we help people do. But again, going back to the earlier conversation, Chris, right? We customize that, right? People say to me all the time, say, like I'm a high school football coach. They go, tell me about your playbook. I go, I don't have a playbook. I've got thousands of playbooks. What we got to do is figure out what your vision is and what systems and structure, will work for you. So hopefully that'll give some of the listeners a bit of an insight into some of the principles behind, practice evaluations and beginning with the end in mind, as the famous author Stephen Covey used to.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, I like the analogy of a playbook, and because you think I love football, you think about the defensive playbook for someone like Mike Vick, back in the day, or Peyton Manning. It's like, obviously, Peyton Manning is not going to leave the pocket, nor is he going to be crossing the line of scrimmage, most likely, versus Mike Vick on any given play. He's going to do either. Like, you have to have spies. You have to have a different crew on the field to manage, the different styles of quarterback and playbook that they have. So it doesn't make sense to have a cookie cutter defense. You may have the best nose guard in the world, but I guarantee you he's not going to do much good against a quarterback like Mike Vick. Like, he's going to outrun a 350-pound D lineman any day of the week, So I love that. I love that it's customized. One thing that I would like to kind of address, and I think it's a limiting belief and fear of a lot of chiropractors that maybe do come to that realization. It's like, man, like maybe their shoulder starts to hurt, their hips start to go out. It's like, I can't do this forever. Especially your high volume docs that you get 10 years in, and it's like, I'm feeling it, but I don't really want to hire an associate, or maybe they're not profitable enough to bring an associate in. They just don't want to manage the team that it takes to see more people, whatever it is. Is a single doc office sellable? And if so, what can those people think about? Because I think, like you said, these principles go, someone that does hair, so a physical therapist, a personal trainer, or, all these people that may not have big staffs, they have low overhead and they're highly profitable. What is sellable when you have like a single doc office, or a single, kind of, or maybe a doc and one CA, or, something like that? What things would need to evolve or transform? What can stay the same? What are the, let's say you make $100,000 a year as a chiropractor, single office, whatever. What can you be looking at as far as a sale versus, a single doc office versus someone that has an associate, making the same amount of money? Is the associate one going to sell for more just because of optics? Or I know there's like 15 different questions in there. So field that as you want. But I think the main thing is the limiting belief of, I have to have a big staff and big crew in order for it to be sellable. What's kind of the
well, it's, again, you got at least 16 questions there, Chris, right? But trying to get the Reader's Digest version here, right? It's again, I'm just going to keep beating that drum. It's about profitability, because some of those bigger offices, the multiple docs or multiple other allied health professionals, they're not necessarily profitable. I consulted with one here in Canada near Toronto that had 32 or 36 team members, like multiple docs and physios and RMTs, 16 RMTs actually.
Wow.
And her profitability, literally, when I started consulting with her, was 13%, 87% overhead. So it's like, there's a lot of illusions that bigger is better, right? There's a Western cultural mythos that bigger is better. Bigger is not always better. I don't want a bigger waistline, Chris, right? I don't want to biggie my fries,
Right.
There's times where you can know when enough is enough. And there's actually a whole exercise we take our clients through to help them realize that when enough is enough, right? So let's dispel that myth. Bigger isn't always better. And in fact, the other challenge that comes up, Chris, is that a lot of times if you do get a bigger practice, it is, say a mom and pop shop practice, as you discussed, the chiropractic middle class, it's maybe worth, a couple $100,000 or something versus one that's worth, a couple million. When you look at the pyramid of buyers that's available to buy that, there's a whole lot more people that could buy the $200,000 business than the $2 million, right? And so if you look at supply and demand, which is one of the oldest and probably most basic drivers of business economics, there's a lot more demand for the $200,000 business than there is the $2 million. Now, as we start to see more and more, private equity money come into chiropractic, it's started. I mean, we have, franchises like The Joint and a few other ones that are, have, hundreds and hundreds of offices. And as we see more of that private equity come in, I think we're going to see the multiples of EBITDA increase over time, for practices. But right now, because a lot of practices are so personality based, they aren't structured, they aren't systematized, they aren't worth as much as they could be, So there's definitely some pieces there. I encourage the mom and pop shop docs to say, you know what, you've got a saleable asset there. It needs to be appraised, because there's no financial institution in North America, Chris, I've found, that will fund the acquisition of a chiropractic practice without a professional appraisal, because it's 90% goodwill. They have no protection if things go bad, right? And we got a great pat in the back up here in Canada about 7 years ago, where one of the big chartered banks, with no lobbying from us, but they just literally put us on the preferred provider group. There's only 2 people on the list, because they saw so many of our appraisals come through. They loved how detailed they were and how much, and the thinking that went into it, that they just put us on the list. And so we've certainly got a lot of business from that bank as a result. But it does bring up the point, Chris, right? If you are going to sell your practice, you do need to think about it from a buyer perspective. You got to think about it from a financing perspective. And there are, again, just, without getting into too much detail, because I know we're tight on time, but, there are times where there's actually an advantage to the doc to actually fund some of the purchase sale, right? Depending upon taxation issues and sort of long-term planning financially, there may be an advantage to being part of the bank note, so to speak, and not just have 100% funding outside, right? So lots of details and things to think through. And sadly, Chris, I don't know, sadly or not, but like most docs do it once in their life. So they have no frame of reference. Commonly isn't done well. I really encourage people to, reach out to companies like us, get some support, get things done properly, so that you can get the best value you can for, your years of service to humanity. Yeah.
So an appraisal seems a little bit intimidating. How much is an appraisal? What is the process like?
Yeah. So in our company, because I can't speak to all companies, but in our company, it's usually it takes about 2 to 4 weeks for people to gather all of the data that we need. And then it usually takes us 2 to 4 weeks to analyze it and come up and basically our algorithm to spit out, the end result, right? So it's a month to 2 month process for most people. I've seen it done in weeks in a couple of really urgent cases. I've also seen people that procrastinate on getting us the data, and it takes months and months and months, right? So yeah. And then, the appraisal, it varies and stuff in terms of, and I can't speak to what other people's are, but, ours is quite affordable. I think our current price point is like $3,500 or something, right? Which is quite affordable relative to what it is. And we always do a follow-up call, Chris, with clients, just to say, I want you to understand, what went into this, so that that this is 100% accurate, so that, when a buyer does come, you can, walk them through why this thing is appraised. They can answer questions at the banking level. That's just part of our service, Chris.
I love it. That's great. Well, Dr. Tom, thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure we could talk another hour long if we wanted to, but I want to honor your time. If people want to follow you, get more information from you, asking a question or, whatever, where can people find more about you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they can obviously find us on socials if they just, search Full Circle Coaching and Consulting, or, our website. It's kind of long to put it in the first time, Chris, but it's all long form spelled out, fullcirclecoachingandconsulting.com. Or they could just reach out to me at my private email, Chris, right? It's a real easy one. It's, drtom at Full Circle Coaching and Consulting, all spelled out long form. And I'd be really happy to just field any questions people have about any of the things we've talked about, whether our 4-pillared model of, vision, focus, systems, and team. Maybe there's a place they're having a challenge, whether it's whatever one of the 4 pillars, they'd like a little thought or a little counsel or a little advice. I mean, hey, I'm about building relationships, Chris, right? So, I'm happy to share some of my knowledge and wisdom and experience with people if they reach out. I'm very happy to do that.
I love it. Well, you've been super generous with your time. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I look forward to connecting with you in the future. Probably see you at a chiropractic seminar or something like that, if you're ever able to leave Canada again. But
yeah, there is that to consider. Sure. So yeah, I look forward to it, Chris. We'll get together again real soon.
Sounds good. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to the Healthy Perspective Podcast. To connect with Dr. Bowman, follow him on Instagram at Dr. Chris Bowman. Until next time, make shift happen.